Good morning. I'm glad that you're here at Discover Church this morning. And on this last Sunday of 2012, the Mayans missed it, I guess. Their calendar stopped, but the year kept going and the world kept going. And here we are, and we find ourselves again at the end of another year. I don't know if it's just my age or medication I might be on now or what, but it just seems like the time is flying so fast. I mean, it seems like we were having the last service of 2011 just like 3 days ago. I mean, it's things seem to go so rapidly now, and I just feel fortunate to be here this morning. Chris was talking about listening to this song, and just the way that things work with the band and everything. I'm the one that uploads the chord charts so all the bands can get it and practice and all of that stuff. And he sent me the chord chart to this song and said, we're doing this on Sunday. And I said, okay. And I didn't say that. I was online, and so I just texted back, okay. And then I put it up, and he had sent a link to the video, and so I clicked on it to watch it. And I watched it again, and I watched the video again, and I watched the video again. And the words to the song just kept rolling in me. And I've known for a few weeks that I was speaking today, and I, for a few weeks, have had planned what I was going to talk about today. And as that song just, I'd work on what I was going to talk about, and I would be listening to this song while I was going to talk about what I was going to talk about. And pretty soon, it was just like God hit me over the head with a baseball bat. It's like, dude, I'm telling you, that's not what I want you to talk about. I want you to talk about something different. And so I quit, doing all my research and stuff, and I went a different direction. And it's weird, I know, but that's the way that God works in me. And so I just followed God. And so today we're going to talk about Him never leaving us alone, about Him being by our side no matter what, about Him being with us every step of the way, being forever faithful this morning. The world hasn't ended, but 2012 is ending. Tomorrow will be the last day of 2012, and if you, as you look back on your life in this year, I want you to think with me. We're going to kind of go on a trip here a little bit, and we're just going to think back over this last year. And I want you to think about how 2012 was for you. And if you're like me, I started thinking about the things that had happened to me in 2012, and I had trouble remembering exactly if that happened to me in 2012 or if that happened in 2011 or if that happened longer ago. There were some dates that were going in my mind, and I couldn't figure out exactly what was going on. And so I thought, I'm on Facebook. All of 2012, I was on Facebook. And they have this thing called a timeline. And so I clicked on 2012 on my timeline, and some stuff started coming up. And I went all the way back to the beginning of 2012, and I realized that 2012 started out a little rough for me. In a couple of ways. It started out good in one way, that 2011, I was sick most of the year. I had some things going on, and come to find out it was just a thyroid issue, but it was causing crazy things. I couldn't remember conversations. My memory was gone. I was so cold that I hurt, and I couldn't eat enough, and there was just like all sorts of weird things. My bones, my joints hurt, and all sorts of crazy stuff going on, and literally I thought I was dying. I thought, well, this is the end. 2012 is the end for me, or 2011 is the end for me. And right before Christmas, I went to the doctor, and they ran a bunch of tests, and they came back and they said, man, your thyroid is jacked. And they gave me some medicine, and they said, it'll take 6 to 8 weeks for this to start working, but when it does, you'll feel better. And I'm not kidding you, 2 weeks or a week later, it started taking effect, and I could start remembering conversations that I had, and it was wonderful. It was like a miracle for me, and things were looking up. And so I thought, man, it's just going to be up. Everything's going to be great from here. And then I got on my timeline and I looked, and I'm just going to let you look at my timeline with me. How's that? The first thing that pulled up was down here in this bottom corner. You can't really read it, but that's a picture of my grandpa. And in February, I lost my grandpa. He was an awesome guy. This was the dude that I went to his house, Unless my parents made me stay home, I was at his house. And he taught me how to shoot a gun, and he taught me how to work on things, and he was cheap, just like I am, and he wouldn't buy anything new, and he always was fixing stuff and doing all sorts of stuff with duct tape and baling wire and WD-40, and that's where I got all that from, and I learned all that, and he was a great guy. And in February, he passed away after a long bout with Alzheimer's disease. So it was kind of weird because he passed away and I was so upset that he was gone. But up until that time, I was so upset that he had Alzheimer's. Because it was like he wasn't really there. He wasn't the grandpa that I'd had my whole life. He was there, but he wasn't there. And it was a weird time for me. And can I just be honest with you today? I'm just going to be brutally honest with you. There were times during all of that I really doubted God. I'm not proud of it, but I just couldn't in my mind fathom how that was okay. How it was okay for this guy that had so much grit and so much determination and so much life in him, for that just to be sucked out of him the way that it was. I asked God for an explanation, and I don't know if he tried to give me one and I wouldn't listen, or if there was just not an explanation. I don't know what the answer was, but I didn't get a good explanation, one that satisfied me. And so there were times in there, man, that I just really doubted. I really doubted that God was in all of that. I really doubted where he was in that. But I found out something. I found out in all of that God was faithful, even when I was unfaithful. Even in my doubt, in my disbelief, when I had questions, when I couldn't find the answer, God was faithful even in those times. 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 11 through 13, it says, "If we die with him, we will also live with him. If we endure hardship, we will reign with him. If we deny him, he will deny us." And then listen to this part. Verse 13 says, "If we are unfaithful, he remains faithful, for he cannot deny who he is." He is faithful. It doesn't matter if you believe or not. He is still faithful. He is God. He is faithful to the end. So no amount of my unfaithfulness and no amount of my doubt, no amount of my questions could ever change the fact that God was faithful in that situation. I'd like to say that I have a much better understanding of what was happening. I've got my theories. But to say that I know for sure, I'm going to use this white mic here. To say that I know for sure what was going on would be, I'd just be lying to you. I don't know why it happened. I don't know what was taking place for sure. But I know through all of that questioning and through everything I was going through, God remained faithful even in my doubt. Even in my doubt, God remained faithful. How was your 2012? Did you have times of doubt? Did you have times when you were unfaithful? Maybe your unfaithfulness went further than just questioning. Maybe your faithfulness went clear to denying him. Maybe your faithfulness went much further. Or your unfaithfulness went much further. But no matter how far it went, I can tell you this, through all of that, God was still faithful. Because he cannot deny who he is. God is faithful. After I spent some time looking through all of that and looking through all the comments that people wrote to me during that time and all of those things, I scrolled on up the timeline a little bit. And I came to another thing here. Go on to that next picture if you don't mind. We did a thing here at the church called He Took Your Place. How many people here took part in that? Were a part of the He Took Your Place thing? Yeah, there's hands. Okay. It was an amazing time. It was something that God just told me that we needed to do. And I was like, I don't know, God, that's a mighty big step. That's kind of out of our personality. It's not really what we do, God. Like He didn't know what we do or who we are. But I just couldn't get it out of my mind, so I talked to Chad, and we decided that as a church we would do that. And we started out with we were going to do it on one day, just, for a few hours during the day, and the response was just unbelievable. And we ended up filling, I think there was 3 days worth of it or something, that we just went from early in the morning till late at night, and people would stand on that cross, and cars would go by, and people would wave and give us the thumbs up and other hand gestures, and they would some would honk and some would yell, and it was just so crazy. But then we began to hear stories of things that happened in people's lives, things that people that were driving by and saw that cross, and they would come and they would talk to me or talk to somebody that was there, and they would have life-changing moments. And Chad told the story of when he was standing on that cross. And it's his story to tell, but I'm just going to give you the highlights here, and you can ask him about it. But he had some things going on and some things that didn't look good that the doctors were telling him. And he came up and he stood on that cross. And you can ask him for all the details. All I know is that what he'll tell you is that he was healed from that particular thing that night on that cross as he stood there at 11 o'clock at night. God was faithful. If that was all that was going to come out of doing that for 3 days, if it was just the fact that God needed to use that to heal what was going on in Chad at that moment, you know what? It was all worth it. God is faithful in our obedience. When God tells us to do something and we step out in faith and we do it, even if it looks like something that we are not, or it's something maybe that is against our character, or it's not something that we would normally do, if God asks you to do something and you do it, you are obedient, God is faithful in that. He will not let you fall. He will not let you fail. God is faithful in our obedience. Not everything on this timeline is so serious. I tried to cut out the most of it that I could, but it seemed like every picture had something about bacon in it. People send me stuff about bacon all the time, and it ends up on my timeline. I tried to keep those things off of there, but right up there in the top corner is some kind of a bacon diagram. I can't remember exactly what it is, but it's crazy. And so I would go through this timeline, and I would laugh, and I would cry, and I was just remembering, and God was just hitting me scroll after scroll about times that He was faithful in my life. Coming out of that He Took Your Place thing, I was on a high, man. I don't know if you've ever done something and you just felt like you stepped out and were obedient to God, and then you see things taking place and you're like, man, this is great. It wasn't just a couple of days, and my wife woke up one morning crying. Like, not just like, oh, I hurt. I mean, she was bawling. This is a woman who went through like 20-something hours of labor, and she didn't cry like she was crying that morning. It was insane. And I took her to the emergency room, and that's a long story, but they messed it all up. And long process of trying to get into different doctors and different specialists. She went for days without sleeping. She went for days sitting up on the couch and just crying. I watched her cry for days, and I'm like, God, man, we just came off of this great thing, and now, boom, what is going on with my wife? And I don't know. I mean, She was having trouble walking. She couldn't move her arm. And it ended up, we got to this specialist, and they scheduled her for surgery the next day. She had a massive disc herniation in her back, and she had two. And they had to go in and fuse some stuff together. I'm not exactly sure about all that. I'm not a doctor. But they did some stuff, and it was a scary time. Because the doctor sat across from us and he said, we do these things all the time. It's pretty routine. We're going to go in there and cut this open, and we're going in through the front of your neck. And I'm thinking, dude, your spine's back there. I don't know why you're going in up here. But they go in, and he said, the worst thing that could happen is that you'll be paralyzed, but that's a small chance. And I was thinking, don't tell that to my wife. She's nervous. And she was scared. And I was scared, but I'm the husband and I got to be strong, and so I was, oh babe, it'll be fine. But before she went into surgery and we were sitting waiting, I was scared. I'm just going to be honest with you. I'm pretty good at working in the moment and coming up with solutions and all that stuff, fly by the seat of my pants. But in that moment, I was scared. I didn't know what was going to happen. And they were taking her into an operating room, and I couldn't be there, and I couldn't protect her, and I didn't know what was going to happen. But I found out that even though I was scared, God wasn't scared. He was faithful in all of that. There's a verse in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 13. It says, the temptations or trials in your life are no different from what others experience. And God is faithful. He will not allow the temptation or the trial to be more than you can stand. When you are tempted or tried, He will show you a way out so you can endure. There was something wrong, and He gave us a way out. He was faithful. She's fine now. Nothing, no complications, no anything. It's just like she was before it happened. And it was a weird deal. She was asleep one night, and she woke up the next morning, and it had happened. No trauma, no anything. Through all of that, God was faithful. Even though I was scared, He wasn't scared. Were there any times in 2012 that you were scared? Come on, guys, it's okay. You can be scared. You just don't tell anybody about it, but you can be scared. Were there some things that scared you? Some things that you thought, I don't know how I'm going to get through this? Well, you sit here today, and you may sit here differently than you thought you were going to be sitting here. Things may not look the way that you had them planned out. But when it's all said and done, God remains faithful. Even through our fear. Even when we're scared, God is faithful. And He will never put more on us than what we can handle. And He'll never put more on us and not give us a way out. A way of escape. If we'll simply follow Him. He's faithful to us. He's faithful to us. Scrolled on up, and there was we went to youth camp this year. A couple days before youth camp time, the people called Daniel and said, the camp's not ready, so we're not having youth camp. What? Can't cancel our youth camp? We got, I don't know how many kids. I mean, there was a bus full of kids we had going to youth camp. And they just said, we're not going to be able to do it. So we got busy. And we called some connections, and one thing led to another, and we got this youth camp. We were just going to go have our own camp. And we threw together a camp in a few days and went down there, and I'm telling you what, it was the best youth camp I've ever been to in my life. Honestly, it was the best youth camp. I've been to some pretty big camps, It was my favorite one ever. And that's a picture that you can't see very well there on the right-hand side of me jumping into, what is that, Little Niagara there at Sulphur. And I'm with my cowboy hat and my shorts, and my legs match my white cowboy hat because I don't see much sun below the knees, it seems like. And so I jumped into that ice-cold water, but that's not the part really that sticks with me. I kind of forgot about it until I saw the picture. The part that sticks with me was 70-something kids in this open-air tabernacle, huddled together, and just praying that God would bless their church, God would bless their school, God would bless their families. I was honored to get to speak to them one night, and I got to lead worship the other nights. And it was an amazing time. And I watched as they devoted themselves to living out a Christian life. They resolved to do things differently, to be better, to not spend the rest of that year the way that they had spent the prior part, to be better Christians, to be better young men, to be better young women. I watched as they devoted themselves to Christ, and He was faithful in that devotion. Since that time, the youth group has grown tremendously. And I think it's a direct result of that time when those kids got together and they began to pray. They began to seek God. And I believe He was faithful in their faithfulness, in their devotion. Scrolled on up into the timeline a little further, and there's a picture of me and my wife and my daughter over there in Texas. I don't know why we went to Texas, but we went to Texas. I agree. Everybody's doing this except for my wife, and we threw things at her later. And so this was the first family vacation that we've taken. She was 14 years old. That's the first family vacation we've taken. It was for a weekend. Now, we've went places. We normally go to volleyball tournaments and things of that nature, and we used to go see family quite a bit. But we never just, the three of us, went off and did something. And it was the best weekend of my life. To be honest with you, we just went and hung out, and we did some stuff, and went to an amusement park thing, and just hung out. And it was the greatest weekend of my life. God's faithful in our relationships with our family when we dedicate ourselves to those relationships. God's faithful. God's faithful. I can honestly say that right now I feel like I am closer to my daughter than I've ever been. And that's odd because she's fixing to turn 15 years old, and that's not normally a time you draw closer to your daughter. But I really believe that that's where we are right now, and I think it's God being faithful in my feeble attempts to be the best dad that I could be. Now, I wouldn't say that I'm the best dad in the world because I mess up. But I think I'm doing my best to be the best dad that I can be. And I think God is faithful in that. When we dedicate ourselves to our family, I think God is faithful. I know God is faithful. And so, what area in your family relationships has God been faithful to you in this year? If you scroll on up, you go through a lot of other things. You go through my daughter starting high school. She got to play on the varsity volleyball team as a freshman. Awesome accomplishment. She stood in this big circle of kids around the flagpole with tons of other kids from our youth group, and I had the honor to play the guitar and lead a few worship songs at See You at the Pole. you scroll on up a little bit more, you see that that's her winning a saddle this year. She started the first of the season. She said, I'm going to go to state and I'm going to win that saddle this year. I was like, whatever. Okay. She did it. She put her mind to it and she worked her tail off. And I think that just shows that God is faithful to our hopes and dreams. God has a plan and a will for your life, but He is a loving God. And He knows that you have wants and desires, and He wants to give you the best things. He wants for you to have the desires of your heart. And He is faithful when you work and when you strive and when you put forth your best effort. God is faithful in those times. I'm not going to go through everything in my timeline, but there's one more that I want to hit on that happened. Most of those things right there are about the shooting that took place in the school just a few weeks ago in Connecticut. And I read as people were taking their kids to school that next day, and I was reading posts on Facebook of people who were just scared, saying that they hugged their kids a little extra. Some kept them home from school. Some walked them into school. Some had trouble letting them out of the car. And I remember sitting there that day and thinking, what if I were in those people's shoes, the people that had experienced that? I don't know how I would handle that. I questioned a lot that next day. The verse popped into my head and it said, God has not given us a spirit of fear. He doesn't want us to be afraid. But to be honest with you, I still don't know that I don't know how I would be in that situation. But when I got to this, I had already looked through all of those other things on my timeline. And I might not be able to tell you how I would be in that situation, but I can tell you this. I know how God would be in that situation. I know how God is for those parents that are going through that loss. I know how God is for those teachers that are suffering, for those first responders that had to go into that horrible situation. I know how God is for them because He's the same way for me and He's the same way for you. He is faithful. He is faithful. In all of that, He is faithful. Even when we are unfaithful, He is faithful. I want to read you something out of Psalm 91 quickly. Psalm 91, verses 1. I'm going to read the whole thing. I want you to listen to these words. It says, those who live in the shelter of the Most High will find rest in the shadow of the Almighty. This I declare about the Lord. He alone is my refuge, my place of safety. He is my God, and I trust Him. For He will rescue you from every trap and protect you from deadly disease. He will cover you with His feathers. He will shelter you with His wings. His faithful promises are your armor of protection. Do not be afraid of the terrors of the night, nor the arrow that flies in the day. Do not dread the disease that stalks in darkness, nor the disaster that strikes at midday. Though 1,000 fall at your side, though 10,000 are dying around you, these evils will not touch you. Just open your eyes and see how the wicked are punished. If you make the Lord your refuge, if you make the Most High your shelter, no evil will conquer you. No plague will come near your home. For He will order His angels to protect you wherever you go. They will hold you up with their hands so you won't even hurt your foot on a stone. You will trample upon lions and cobras. You will crush fierce lions and serpents under your feet. The Lord says, I will rescue those who love me. I will protect those who trust in my name. When they call on me, I will answer. I will be with them in trouble. Listen to this. I will be with them in trouble. I will rescue and honor them. I will reward them with a long life and give them my salvation. I will save them. That's what God says. You say, I don't see a way out. God says, I will give you my salvation. You say, I don't see how you're in there, God. I don't see how you're in this situation. God says, I will protect you. I will protect you. God says, I am faithful. Even when you're unfaithful, I am faithful because I cannot deny who I am. I am faithful. You can look back at your 2012. You can go further back if you want to. As I started doing this, I started going back further in my life, and I just started bringing up times when God was faithful to me. He was faithful. Even when I couldn't see it at the time, He was faithful. How was your 2012? Some of you may be coming off of the greatest year of your entire life. And some of you may wish that this was the last year of your life. I would wager to say we've got people from one extreme to the other in here. And I don't know the answer to all of your questions. I don't know the answer to all of your doubts. I don't know the answer to all of your fears. But this I do know. I know that God has been faithful and that God will be faithful. God was faithful when I was unfaithful. God was faithful when I doubted. God was faithful when I feared. God's been faithful when I thought that I couldn't do this anymore, and God's been faithful when I thought that I did the greatest job of my life. God is God, and He is faithful.